friends who seem to be sending me some of the same messages. There's an understanding that if you do get out on those edges, that there aren't very many out there with you, if anyone. So there's that danger of, let's not make it worse. Underscoring that. At least let's send the message, we respect you from getting out there. And in fact, we're going to, on an act of faith, believe that if you manage to come back and tell us a story, we benefit. But what we're not going to do is damn you for being that different, because you already have enough damnation just by being different. And that was kind of a message I got from them. This is very different from what I not only see in the West, but what I maybe particularly saw in psychology.
We don't want to talk about Fritz Perls.
No. There's so many people we don't want to talk about in psychology.
Even ones that looked the part more, like Fromm. We don't talk about Fromm very much.
Fromm and all these ones were not supposed to talk about. I could just, my list grows.
But they did that beautiful thing of bringing in, no, science is important. However, you can't scientifically explain to me why this poem is better than that poem to me. That's magic.
That's where I see that split in philosophy. There's 4 divisions. Ontology, epistemology. That's science, baby, right there. But that's all scientific. Over here, ethics and aesthetics. What we find beautiful, what we find right and wrong. That's not science's baby. That's the stuff of speculative philosophy and religion. Yeah. We need both. And Benjamin says this, over here, that's dialectical materialism. That is science. It's a material approach. But he said that dialectical materialism can only work if it has theology underneath it. And he uses an example of, it was around the turn of the century, there's supposed to be this robot. It was this thing in a booth, and you would ask it questions or play chess, whatever, and it would do the stuff. Well, it turned out there was a dwarf underneath it. There was everything. And he said, this is a good example of what's going on. What you're seeing on the surface is the dialectical materialism, science and resources. But underneath something very, very, without it, it's incomplete. Without it, you end up with Stalin and Khrushchev. And that's that theology. Now, he was talking about, doesn't specifically say that, but this was very much a mystical Judaism that he was looking at. That he never talks about collectives or individual salvation. It's always collective salvation. That our task is to save all of us. And not just to save all of us for some imagined afterlife, but here and now, those people under the goddamn overpasses without water, it's to save them.
Instead of put them in jail and
Instead of putting them in fucking jail.
It's illegal to be homeless in Oklahoma now. There's a law. Yeah. What? These people have suffered enough. And this is the thing. Bill Hicks said that, right? In the end of one of his shows, he said, it's all a ride. All we have to do is invest in the right thing. There's enough to go around. We don't have to have the tooth or claw. We've mentioned that in a different episode, but it's true. But if we can break our ethic of fighting to coming together.
And competition,
competition with yourself. Great, beautiful.
We've been normalizing competition as the highest interaction. And it goes back to play, right? It's the traditional story of play in Western psychology is we start with unoccupied play. Then we have parallel play. Then we have cooperative play. Then highest is competitive. And it's showing an increase in cognition and social understanding. That's only in Western cultures. Dr. Lippischee was here. Was trained in phenomenological psychology. She did a comparative study and found out in collectivistic cultures, it was the same, except it flipped the top two, that the highest level play was cooperative. The competitive play was considered cruder. It was on the way. It was necessary. But the highest level person was up here.
And that makes more sense to me.
Me too.
And Montessori was saying this in education.
Same thing. Vygotsky was saying it in cognition.
Yep. This is where I think those people, when we look at collectivism, they're going to do better at building meaning because there's no, well, I want my kid to be a doctor. Why? What if your kid wants to be a mechanic? Why is that a bad thing? Right? Just let it be a mechanic. And then they're going to be doing, we need mechanics, don't we? We need plumbers. We need all the people. So in this now, there's no, oh, I'm better than you. It's, we need each other. I need you to do the mechanicking thing so I don't have to do it. You need me to read a bunch of books and do this so that I can teach people. So that we have now a society. If we're all engineers, it's done.
It's done.
It's over. Like it's all, that is the worst part of us.
Put the rose back on the stem.
Yeah. Well, like homogeneity never works. Like it never is. You're the easiest thing to die out.
You know, I was very sad that presentation I gave. I think you put the, because none of my colleagues out of the department came, and I was focused on that. They needed to hear that. The God students came and kept talking to me about it. And I realized something. The students saw it, the need. They were experiencing the lack. Faculty can't afford to see that. They would have to change. They would have to grow. They would have to question them. And that's a lot to ask.
I would say that's the bare minimum we should ask ourselves. Wouldn't that be a better world?
Wouldn't it be a better world?
If the bare minimum you would do is wake up and say, I need someone to make me accountable to my passions, my dreams, the things that I love. Things that artists do to the point of starvation. End up being homeless themselves sometimes. They do a beautiful thing. And it goes against logic, it goes against reasoning, it goes against everything. They are embedded into the world that they know that they're supposed to be in. And they can't escape it. Now sometimes we give them a nice diagnosis.
Yeah.
And say they're off. You have this disorder or that disorder or whatever. And that's not saying that people shouldn't have diagnosis from time to time or shouldn't have something that's called a disorder from time to time. But it's also to say, what's the underlying truth of therapy? And I think this is the point you were making earlier, is to make us all the same.
Yeah.
The normal. What is normal?
That's why I love this Dr. Rumsfeld, this old clinician I had. Teacher taking advanced abnormal from him. And talking about psychosis. And he talked about when he was in graduate school, working on that dissertation, he had a psychotic episode as he was driving. Now, of course, you can imagine hearing this. I sit in the back row. I've always had to hide, but I'm like, leaning, talk. I watched everybody in the class, you can hear this, everybody in the class move back away from me. That was interesting. What's he going to say about this? And he describes that experience. He said, crazy thoughts going through his head, delusions, am I God? Is there a demon? And he said, watching the ground bubble and seeing things. And he said he just had barely enough sanity. In fact, he was specializing in, he said, to know what he was experiencing was psychosis. And if there's anything good to come out of this, these were the people he chose to work with. And the one thing he did not have was the experience of having it. And Gabe's hand goes up. What did you do then? And he said, I realized I couldn't drive. I parked my car. And he said, man. And he said, I went home. And he said, the horror. And he said, this really gave me. He said, I didn't know if it would stop. I hoped it would. And he said, and it did. It was less than 24 hours. He said, brief psychotic episode. And he said, best fucking thing to ever happen to him. He said, first, he really critiqued how we do PhDs in psych, how dehumanizing it is. So he said it was giving him, look at me, honor student, this is what you do, you get fucking crazy from it, and you're supposed to go work with people. You know, he said the other was that compassion, the experience of having schizophrenia, especially that fear. He said he had really thought he could hang on to just a little bit, that he knew he didn't have, you know, a tendency towards it as far as he could tell. And so he knew that it would probably pass. But that fear of it never passing was worse than the actual experience. And he said that abject terror, he said from that point on, anybody that was experiencing this, oh, they were not people with schizophrenia. They were people who must be so scared. And if they aren't, where are they gaining that bravery to deal with?
Mm-hmm. That's where I think a lot of times just normal isn't Gabor Mate his book The Myth of Normal. Even medically, there's not a normal.
No.
Not that normal doesn't apply to all of us. It's not like a goal we should strive for because it's not something attainable for all of us. We have to understand the individual at some point.
That's Hippocrates is right on it. Yes, he's after normal of that person.
Right.
Second to that is there may be some stuff across people, but that was second.
Well, and the normal's maybe 70%. What about the other 30?
What about the others?
Where are they at? Because they have a normal too, and it's a normal for folks that have suffered schizophrenia. Have a normal. Normal is a fluid thing, not a static thing. And so, what was it? What was the Nietzsche quote? Truth is a statement of power, not a statement of fact.
Yes.
It's a power thing. And that's not power this way, but it's just how many people agree this is true for them. It's a power. That doesn't mean it's fact. It just means among that group, that is what you would find. Among cannibals, Taco Tuesday is different. You know? It's just different. Normal. Perfectly normal for them. Right? Not so normal for me. So you have to look, and this is where we'll do the magic that we do. We loop it back in. This is the story building that Smith is talking about. What's your normal? What are you doing? If you're not building your own meaning, if you're not building your own thing, then what are you? How can you be happy? You can be medicated. Those aren't the same thing. Medicated by a TV show, by drugs, by drinking, by whatever, it doesn't matter. Whatever the medicine is, sex, also a medicine. You can be medicated. Video games would be a good medicine too.
Oh, man.
But you're not happy. The happy or content person might also do those things. That's one of the arguments here. Well, I saw you watch TV too. Oh, yeah, sure, I do. How much time do I spend on it?
Yeah.
I might binge watch it for a day. And then you don't see me really on it for a couple weeks because I've got the other things going. It's not every day. And that's it. We all have the common effort. You know? The thing is I just don't stay there because I realize that I'm more, and maybe people should be more than that. Just that. Yeah. As a consumer is what someone else wants me to be. Buying products that are on commercials, etc. What do you want to be?
Yeah.
And that's the thing you can fall in love with. I fall in love with myself, and I hope everybody does, more and more as I keep finding out the things that are interesting to me and why they're interesting to me. Putting that whole puzzle together more and more. And so I'll say two things, both from my artist friend who's Padre folk art. he shared this story with me. So he has a tattoo of a bee and a tattoo of a fly on his hand. And he goes, these are the most important tattoos I have on my body. I mean, he's got tattoos all over. I was like, really? He's like, it's a story behind the tattoos. So he met a man who told him everything in life is either going to be the bee or the fly. And I'm paraphrasing, but he said, now a fly can be in heaven, but it's going to look for shit to land on.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the bee can be in Chernobyl and it's going to look for a flower. What do you want to be? Right? Which of those are? And I was like, that's a cool story. And I've never heard bees and flies. That's a new one.
I like that.
It reminded me of the one that I probably a little bit more common. We talk about, the little boy and the shaman. And he goes, I feel like there's two dogs in me fighting. And one of them's of peace and one of them's of war. The shaman looks at him and goes, you're very wise to say that. He goes, but I'm afraid. Which one's going to win? And he just looks down and goes, the one you feed. It's the same thing. It's the same. What narrative are you building? And so I think that's been my takeaway. And I really, really am happy I ran into him and had that talk. Because we do this with each other, especially about love. We always think love has to be a sexual thing. It has to be like, oh, you want to get naked, right? And he and I had this big talk about love and the beauty of falling in love and how it just fills you, right? Not about sex. And so when I left him, I shook his hand. I was like, all right, it was good seeing you. And he goes, hey, thanks. I was like, for? And he goes, for coming by and helping me fall in love with you again. And that's the coolest compliment I've ever heard my whole life. I realized that in that moment. I was like, oh my God.
That's
right?
nice.
Here is a guy who's been very rough around the edges in his life, who's only expressing love. He's doing something right. Because I don't hear that when I'm around a lot of other people.
I don't either.
It's a beautiful moment. Anyway, it's not sexual in any sense. He's a straight man. I'm a straight man. And he's got a family. I've got a family. We're doing this thing. And it's about this connection. I remember when we were talking about love, we mentioned that. Like, it's not a sexual thing. Like, I love you, you love me. We've loved each other for 2 decades. It's more than that. Sex would be the medicine part. Like the quick fix, the Band-Aid.
Sister Faith, who I really love so much as I was capable of doing it, that I wondered, is it sexual? Am I attracted to an almost 80-year-old nun?
If she's wearing the right costume.
My God, she was so full of life that, of course, sexuality would come into play. But I remember asking her about this at one point. I could not understand how any human being who was alive,
right?
I understand I'm 18 or 19 years old, could choose to be celibate and be alive until I asked her about it. This takes a lot to ask a nun, an old nun, about sexuality. And it's like, sister, I can barely say it. And she said, you're talking about sexuality, aren't you? The topic was intimacy. That she was saying to me, I was confusing sexuality and intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
And I
love that.
The way she goes, now, I'll be very upfront with you. I shouldn't have gone into the convent at age 12. They sent her in. She goes, that's wrong. You should be an adult before you make the choice. She said, and I was very gifted that it's where I needed to be. And she said, but I never had sex. She goes, now, I'm imagining that if you put sex and intimacy, it's as good as a kiss cake. If the two go together. She said, I haven't had that experience. I had the experience of intimacy. And she said, and she had told me, she said, I think you're having the experience. She goes, I know you're having the experience of sex, but I wonder if you're recognizing intimacy. But I found that just that moment.
Yeah.
And then where she looks at me, she goes, Gabriel, of course she goes, I have red hair, right? She's red. And she goes, and I am a poet. Of course. Yeah. It was very hard on me when I was young. Of course. And I love just the way that, and here was a person who may have made a difference. She made a different choice. But so conscious, so aware. So not judging herself for her own sexual desire. That's part of it. But saying for her, it was that if someone was promiscuous for her, it was that was someone was looking for true intimacy, but they weren't finding it.
Right.
And you were to admire them and cherish them for their desire for intimacy, not for their damn them for their promiscuity. For her, that was you were reaching for something, but it was just in the wrong places.
Mm-hmm. Because it feels like it for a minute.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, however long people have sex. Whatever it is.
It's why we oppress women.
Right.
It's that multiple orgasms.
Yeah.
No, never forget
they can have sex all day. We can go 2 or 3. That's something to hate. But I what's funny is, so when I was after my freshman year of college, I decided, a little bit naive of a person, but I wanted to be a priest. I was like, I'm going to be a priest because they help people. And I grew up in the Catholic Church where people went to the priest, and the priest was like a therapist, and he did all the things, and he helped people. And so I went to talk to a priest about being sponsored into seminary. And I'll be grateful to him for the rest of my life. He looked at me, and he had white hair, was going all over the place. And he looked like he was probably a good 6 drinks into the day. It was like afternoon. He goes, thinking about being a priest? I was like, yeah. He goes, I know what you're struggling with. I was like, you do? So I really wasn't struggling with anything. I was like, I think this is the right thing. And he goes, it's the no sex thing, right? And I was like, oh, he goes, I'm not going to lie to you. It's hard. He's like, it's really hard. He's in his 70s, And I started thinking immediately, like, oh shit, if he hasn't figured this out, like, I'm doomed. There's no way this is the right place for me. And I was like, I think you're right, Father. I probably should do something else. He goes, I just want to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I'm sure, like, he went back and poured another one. But it was a rough day for him. But I remember, I don't know if you remember this conversation back when in grad school. And I looked at you and I said, Gabe, honest question. And you go. I go, do you ever, like, get to a point where, like, you can just work without the thought of sex? Like, just hormones just don't do their function. I don't know if you remember your answer, but it was hilarious. I'll remember it forever. You started laughing. I said, this is probably something stupid to say, and it's stupid to ask. And he started laughing. He goes, you know what? I asked Dr. Knight the very same thing. And I was like, you did? And he was like, yeah. Or you said, yeah. And I said, well, what did he say? And he looked at me and goes, hell, I don't know. Ask someone older than me. and so you went to Fredrickson, who was definitely older. I think Fredrickson probably was in his 60s, 70s at that time.
70s.
And his answer to you, when you asked him, was, that's a very important question. And I'll let you know the answer as soon as I learn the answer. But that's the thing. Sometimes that sexual desire is the want of a deeper connection.
Yeah.
Something that anchors us to the moment. It's not always about sex, and just the physical expression and intensity that is gratifying. While that is great, sometimes it's a pursuit of something else.
Yes.
And I think we have people, and I agree with you, who get lost in that, and they just settle for, well, I'll never get that, so I'll just keep doing this. And males and females both, and they get stuck there. And they're also not moving forward in who they are and who they're developing. They're medicated. They've chosen the medicine versus the grueling work of, like your nun, maybe celibacy for a little bit was the right answer. That maybe was the cure. You were getting medicine, but the cure would have been, I'm just going to.
She actually brought that up. Yeah. Without that, her experiences, she wouldn't have been in that place where she was so pushed towards some kind of intimacy. And that's where she learned to fall in love with all of her sisters. I had not even imagined that nuns were human beings and that they would form a sisterhood in these convents.
I thought all they did was lift weights, and
that's what I imagined. If they went back to the convent, they prayed and then planned on, how to kill me the next day because I was
right.
a pain in the ass.
Maybe knitted something or something like that. But then you learned that like the convents were actually like brothels for a lot of priests in certain places, or cardinals or whoever. And they're like, oh God. There's a sinister view of that as well.
Yeah.
Which was tragic and horrible. So yeah, it to me all comes back to meaning, which only further, and maybe this is just me trying to do self-fulfilling prophecy or justify my existence. But if it is, fuck you, it's my story, I'm writing it. It only brings me back to humanistic types of psychology.
That's really, at this point, all I'm really interested in.
That's me.
I'm hesitant to say that for fear some psychologist will hear me and then take that as a personal insult. I'm just saying that's for me. I'm not really interested in any of this other stuff. I feel like I have a degree of mastery of multiple sub areas. If people don't agree, then come up with a good test and I'll take it. But they have to take it too.
Yeah.
That's a two-way goddamn street.
You know what you're reminding me of? There was a professor, I won't name him, who was on campus, and I loved him. A lot of people didn't like him. He was very dry, but like I saw there was more there. And then he and I started talking, and I learned that he used to be in a punk band, like back in the 70s and stuff. And like he was, and you see this whole other side of him. And so he sends me an email, and he goes, "Hey, come by my office. I want to talk to him." I said, "Oh, sure." Go by his office. And he has a young woman in the room with him who's doing stuff. And he was like, I want to let you know, I'm not going to be able to teach anymore. He goes, I've been battling cancer, and I've been going down to MD Anderson to get transfusions and doing all these things. And he goes, it's not easy, but it's taking too much time, and I need to focus on health and everything else. And he was older, and and I was like, oh, that's terrible. Is there anything I could do? He goes, well, that's why I asked you to come by. I don't know why. I took it as a compliment, but like also it was one of the, like, really? He said, do you know anybody who has access to acid or LSD, anything like that? And I was like, I think it's weird that you asked me like that. But I was like, I know a couple people. Yeah, like I know a couple people who could probably. And he goes, I really just want to do acid again, because the last time in my life where I felt fully me, right after I used to do acid when I was younger. Because I did acid for the wrong reasons there. I was in the band. The young woman that was in his office was his daughter. And she looked at me, she goes, Dad, I didn't know. And that's when I learned it was his daughter. And I was just like, oh. He goes, oh, sweetie, yes. I've done a lot of things in life. He just left it. But it's that I need to do something to break my tether to this place
Yeah.
so that I can see who I am still. And I can have an
Yeah.
honest experience with myself. Even though it's delusional, but that takes me back to the person that you were working that was schizophrenia. But now I'm more sincere.
Yeah.
Because I'm less clouded with this. And this isn't obviously a commercial for people to do LSD or something like that. But it is intriguing to me that a lot of the people who were researchers who did LSD, like that book would tell you, I'm pointing to a book called Psychonauts, were all people exploring. William James did things, and Aldous Huxley did some stuff, and we all know Richard Alpert Ram Dass and Timothy Leary. All of these folks participated in things like that because it would break them from what they can't escape. Now, here's the beautiful thing. I don't think you have to do that to break. Deepak Chopra mentioned he used to do LSD quite a bit, and that now he doesn't have to because he knows.
Well,
He knows where those doors of perception are.
Yeah, you get that Aldous Huxley.
Yeah.
That it's just one way to knock those doors open. There are others. It may be a little too quick for some.
It could be traumatic as fast as it is.
I've had in deep meditative states some same experiences. I think there are many paths to that. I think the danger with the drug path is what the Sikhs call false insight. They get that sense. But I also think that there's a building towards a true insight. It could be a degree of false insights lead you there. I remember asking a peyote roadman about, he was explaining to me the various levels of participants, that really it was the patient's family, and the roadman who were real serious about healing. And then the outer group was there, but they were also just enjoying it. And then he was talking about people that just showed up to get high.
Right.
And I said, well, you don't like that? He goes, oh, that's fine with us. I said, what? He said, they're showing an interest. And he said, that may be the only time they come. But he said, they're on the outer. They're part of the community. And it's that whole community. And that's when he invited me to come, even though I knew it was illegal. He said, I'd love to have you show up. He said, you're a little bit more. But I was like, I'm afraid I'll be just too Western. And he goes, so?
What?
We always have these people who show up for the party. He said, now that's our focus is on healing a person. But that really struck me, that he wasn't asking you to be a perfect insight. He's talking about humanity.
No.
And gradations. It's kind of like when Carlos Castaneda defends a relative everybody's making fun of in the family because he's a drunk. He's like, he's trying to change his perception. Some of you aren't. At least he's doing that.
It's maladaptive where he's gotten, but you don't understand what it's like to swim until you put your toe in the water. Yeah. You've got to start somewhere, right? Now, I'm grateful that I've never had to do drugs to be the odd one. And it can come naturally to me. My brain just kind of goes. And maybe that's a sign that something bad will happen to me later with my cognition and whatever. And that's okay. That's life too. That's why we need this podcast. We really need this podcast to take off in case I form some weird kind of thing later. I can afford to have doctors follow me around and make it okay. There. Don't mind saying that. But no, I think some people are kind of born on the outskirts, and I think sometimes people are socially pushed to the outskirts. But I've always had this idea that no matter for whatever reason you're on the margins of the paper, the answers are going to come from there. It's not going to come from the text that's in the center. Anybody who sees a book that I've read, I haven't read this one yet. This was a bad example. But if this were my book and I had read it, I would have little notes all wrong to sides. And those are my notes. Those are my gaps that I see in the work. My answers are going to come from here, not there, because if it came from there, I wouldn't need to write a damn thing down.
That's true.
This is me building my version of what's going on. That's what the answer. If the center of the page worked, none of us are suffering.
Yeah.
It didn't work, which is why the world needs these people, which is why they don't want us joining together. They want us fragmented out so that we don't come together to make a force stronger than they can handle. And they'll count on us working against our own interests so that we can be in a group.
I go back to Foucault, just struck me. The late stuff, ethics and subjectivity, where he says the biggest threat to the modern institution is not ideologies, it's friendship.
Yes.
The one thing a modern institution cannot deal with is friendship. Pre-modern institutions could handle it. And part of it is because when it gets down to it, they can't predict. We will go against the institution.
Absolutely.
For the friend.
Well, and this is the thing. If everybody's a friend, which you and I have always been this way, we want to belong to everybody. We never had to.
That's it.
We fit just fine in the power structure. Right? We have all of those born privileges dancing within us to a degree. But those aren't enough. Why? Because we're willing to consider more.
Yeah.
We're willing to fall in love with another. And those others are often people who aren't just like us.
Yeah.
And their stories are more interesting anyway.
Yeah, I'm bored with me.
I'm bored. Horribly. I actually just said that to students the other day. I said, if I could have everyone be like me, I said, seriously, if you in this room right now thinking, oh, I want to be just like Steven. I said, you know who would hate that the most? Me. It'd be boring. I love that you are you, and I love being able to grow from me interacting with you. It's a two-way street. When I interact with my students, it's not just them benefiting, if anyone's benefiting. It's me too. A lot of their stories that I will use later when I'm trying to make a point come from their lives.
Yeah.
And so we have to be willing, I think, to do that. And it takes a little bit of vulnerability and being a little bit humble.
It takes a hell of a
to find your truth in the stories.
That's like I remember as a teacher, not wanting to do it, but saying, one of the tests of a teacher is when they're wrong. And I said, I'm going to be wrong at some point. And I said, how am I going to deal with that? Am I going to crush the person like so many teachers have crushed me? Am I going to deny it? What am I going to do here? I think that's going to be important. And I was like, well, I hope I get at least like a month into teaching before I'm
wrong.
And don't know something. Second day, Jesus almost did the second day. It was a grammar question, and I can feel it in me. How dare you, you little shit! I want to crush your fucking, and I can't. I press your glass. Yeah, I thought, God, that's wrong. It's been done to me. And then I thought I could deflect this, just mutter and talk about how grammar isn't important unless I'm telling you it's important. And then just figured it out. I felt all these things go through. And then I'm like, Jesus Christ. I'm getting it, all right. The test. It's at day 2. Day 2, my ignorance is revealed. Open. And I told him, God, it hurt. I said, I don't know. He said, don't you have degrees? Aren't you supposed to know? I said, I feel like I'm supposed to know. But here I was waiting for
getting hit with a staple
to come
in the head
apart.
hurts.
Most of the students weren't paying attention, thank God. That's always a redeeming thing. And they're like, oh, fuck, we just want to get through this shit, right? And the few that were like, oh, wow. He just admitted he doesn't know something. That sounds human. The world didn't end. It didn't mean that I didn't know anything at all. And I remember saying it, and I was so worried. I'll go get back to you. I come back the next day, found it. He'd forgotten to even ask the question.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, here I'm all tied up in this. And in fact, that was the most liberating thing. Got that out of the way. The not knowing thing. God, that feels good. I'm glad it was day 2. I wish it would happen day 1. I'd be better at this. And then it's, wow, can I use this? Because it's going to happen. And then I'm like, you don't know shit, Kevin. You don't know shit. Fuck. It's going to happen again. What are you going to do the next time? Are you going to go look it up? And I thought, fuck no. First, I'm too lazy. I don't look it up. Secondly, isn't teaching them how to fish more important than giving them a fish? And it happens again like 2 days later. I don't know shit. All my good teaching was I don't know shit. And it's like this time it's like, no, I don't know the answer to that, but I know where to look. Go look. And I'm like, that's better.
Right.
And then I'm like, it's going to happen again. This is what destroyed my life. And sure enough, this is all my first class, right? Happens again. And I'm like, you know what? I don't know that, but I do know where to look. But I'm not even going to tell you that. I want you to go find where you would.
But see, like that's the whole thing. That's the story building. You can see just in that example how you're deciding how you're going to approach a very sensitive, vulnerable moment.
Yeah.
Where you're publicly identified as being wrong. I remember, I think any teacher worth their salt has those stories. Unless you have a very bad room where people don't feel comfortable saying things. But I had a student, Kaylin, I'll always remember her, out of the gate. I'd use the story to say, it was about percentages. And I was like, oh, it was only like 3% of my graduating class was black. And that changed it to like 4%. And I was just, I don't even know what the real percentage is. I'm just ballparking. It was small, my point. And she raised her hand. I was like, yeah. And she goes, was it 3 or 4? And I go, was what 3 or 4? She goes, the percent, you've changed it. And I was like, you shit. First thing I thought, I was like, oh, yeah, fair. No. I said, honestly, I don't know. I said, look, this is a great opportunity. If I make a mistake, I am perfectly happy being called on it because it makes me better. Like if I'm going to not know the real number, I need to be at least consistent in the number that I use. And that makes it easier for you to follow. I said, so please never hesitate to reach out and like express what it is. And she goes, oh, you want us to tell you? And I was like, oh, absolutely. Call me out. And she goes, do you know there's a typo on the slide? And I was like, okay, maybe not all at once. Take a break. Use that next week.
That is something right.
God, but it was such a wonderful, and I think in that moment, everyone was able to take score of we're getting through this together. I'm not teaching English, so grammar mistakes gonna happen. Even if I was teaching English, grammar mistakes gonna happen. But none of us, them or me, should be in existence that's so insecure you can't be wrong. Because if you do that, then you've shut yourself off from learning, you've shut yourself off from loving, you've shut yourself off from finding meaning. It's broken. And all you will have is chaos all around you.
And I love that. I got Bohr and Einstein, that beautiful relationship. They never agreed on the fundamental principles. But I love how Bohr, neither one would let it go. But he'd go to Einstein rather than either or. He'd be, am I a little bit right? Am I a tiny bit right? Yeah. Is there one part of what I'm saying that's right? I mean, this went on for 20 years. And they had such joy in it that it turned into
then when one of them
a subfield of when they realized they weren't going to agree.
Right.
I was so fascinated. How did they do that? It was friendship. It was love. That they could look at each other, respect each other. They each had a fucking Nobel Prize, and they fundamentally disagreed on a basic principle of physics, didn't care, let's go out and have a party with this.
Absolutely. And the two of them probably pushed each other into better understanding of physics ultimately because they're coming from different angles.
That
and
was
pushing.
exactly, they took the other one's criticism very seriously, but not to the point that they were going to change their minds just because
but
this
grow.
dear friend, but to grow from it. And maybe like when I got out of board because of reading, finding out of his difficulty in language. Einstein was a better writer, but seeing how complementarity, it's not like it ahas all at once. It develops over time.
Mm-hmm.
It's a slow process. And in fact, there was an intermediary theory called correspondence theory, where he's trying so hard to fit that Newtonian model. And it just doesn't work. But you see those gradations of moving towards where it's a truth. But as he said, I loved it at one point. He said complementarity is just the best explanation we have right now. And then he says, and it will probably be shown to be wrong. And for him, I'm like, oh my God, we still have 90% of physicists. We need to catch up with complementarity. And you, the one who is already saying, I'm probably wrong.
Well, it'll become wrong at some point. That reminds me of like MLK and Malcolm. Very different approaches, and honestly, without both, probably things don't change.
Yeah,
because they needed a hard line but towards the end of their lives, they were both coming together.
In fact,
they were both moving into a similar or complementarity kind of vibe.
Yes, they were.
It wasn't so militant on the extremes. It was coming here.
And then if you look at how they truly merge, they merge in Nelson Mandela, the peaceable MLK, but the guy who refuses to take violence off the table.
Right.
So there he is. He's taking from, and Malcolm too. You see Malcolm. He's not quite moving to nonviolence, but he's moving away from separatism, which is a form of violence. You see that move? I find it very interesting that's when we shoot him.
That's when everybody gets murdered. No, you're too reasonable. We can't mock you anymore. But that's probably an hour.
Yeah,
maybe more. As it is always. I will end with saying, I really hope, pray, whatever, that you stop pursuing the fleeting moment of happiness, dive full into the thing that you find meaning in, grow it, be brave enough to know that you're going to suck at it for a while, but just show up every day and keep doing the great thing. I had somebody recently call me out on, I have a tendency to say, well, it'll probably suck, but I'll do it anyway. That's my default, because like I don't want to let failure get in the way of me trying. So I just say it'll probably suck, but I'm gonna do it anyway. And she said, why don't you just say I'm gonna do it? Don't put an evaluation on it at all. Just do it. Let other people decide. And I'm like, that's probably fair, because that'll also make me aspire to make it better.
Well, you can do,
because if I say it's gonna suck, then there's nothing to challenge.
What I do, if I try to do something I know is impossible, and I never achieve it, ever.
Right.
I used to hate myself for that. But I achieved something really cool on the way. And I've learned, if I go for the impossible, I'm not going to get that, but I'll get this other thing. And the cool thing about it is, I don't know what this other fucking thing is.
Not yet.
I don't know until it actually shows up.
You might not know until you get past it and you go back to it and say, oh my God, that's where I should have been. That's the thing that was important.
And so that now I don't always do that. I don't like failing. I just know it's necessary.
Yes. And that's, so I think that's something I need to work on, is to just say, instead of saying it'll probably won't be very good, but here, it's just to say, here. Yeah. And then work my ass off to make it as good as I can. Right? Like that's the goal. Instead of assuming that it's not going to be great so that I don't have to put in the extra effort. No, do my best and then say, now judge it. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's at a place where it can be judged. I don't know, but find your meaning. Do the whole like, share, comment, all the subscribe if you haven't. Whatever. Parting words.
Well, I'm dour. I could say something like, die soon and fester. But live long and prosper.
Festering is the new life. Festering is the new life.
That's right. Like the old joke. Did you change your mind? If so, good. I hope it's better than the last one. And on that note,
I love both. Thank you all.